So I want to begin by asking you, Shyam, whatever possessed you to make this film and take on something that was such a complex and difficult challenge.
Well, there's particular book which was an autobiography of a Marathi film actress called Hansa Vadkar, a partner of mine, professional partner in my company, much older man. He was in the film business for a long time. He used to be with Prabhat Studios, which is one of the premier studios of Bombay, Pune at the time. And she was one of his actresses too, because he'd made a couple of films with her. And he brought this book and he said, I would like you to read this, because it was in Marathi, so I didn't know how to read Marathi, so he read it out to me. And I got very excited with this story for several reasons. One of the things was, of course, the kind of woman she was, and I could see in her a kind of seminal feminist. That was the number one. That was something that really caught my attention. And the second thing, of course, was that she was part of the Indian film industry at a particular time in its history, from the time of the early sound era into the 50s. And that period itself is very exciting. And it's also very interesting because when I came to this book, when this partner of mine, Mr. Garnika, he read this book out to me, we used to occupy an office in a place called Jyoti Studios. Now, Jyoti Studios happens to be the oldest film studio where the first sound film was made. Alamara was shot there in 1930-31. And I was, in fact, I used to love that office because I used to live with the ghosts of all these folks who'd made films from the silent era onwards. And there used to be these old posters and old reels of films. And, it generally was quite a fabulous place. And there would be scripts written by filmmakers. And also, so the whole sense of the Indian film past was all there. And all of that came back with this book. Because there were many things in it, like, how films used to be shot. And the story of this wonderful director who was making, he used to make these kind of B-grade films. And if somebody acted Bolsheviks into the heroine of the film, he would sack them on the spot. It didn't matter what part of the film he was at. And then he would replace, because he told the producer, he said, "Don't worry about it, I'll replace this person. I'll turn him into a parrot." and so that became the kind of story of the film. And all of this, I was living with all of this. And suddenly I said, this would make a wonderful film, because Hansa Vadkar's life is itself quite exciting. And of course, there's a whole thing about women's, feminism and this kind of empowerment of women basis of the story, which I was also very interested in. And then, of course, it got down to scripting the film. And as I was scripting the film, ready to shoot the film, suddenly we found that there was a great shortage of film stock in the country. There was a foreign exchange shortage. And these shortages were dreadful at that time, and you had to, you were sold stock, almost measured, And so there was no color stock, very little color stock, and I couldn't get any more. And if I wanted to continue to shoot this, if I wanted to shoot the film, I had to shoot it in several kinds of stock. The film that we were getting at that time, Kodak, color film of Kodak, of course, was limited. And then I could get other kinds of color, like there was an East German stock called Orwo, which was dreadful stock, but then we could buy it for rupees, so we had that stock available. And so I told my cameraman, Govind Nelani, I said, I'm going to change the whole structure, the concept of this film. because I'm going to use the past, in the story, by stock. The way they used to use that in the film industry. So I used black and white, tinted, of course, for the earliest period, and then I used black and white. And then, of course, very much like what was happening in India, I used Orvo when Orvo was being used. Then finally, of course, monopack color, the way Kodak was for the present time. And of course, nobody agreed with me, but fell in line because my cameraman said, I don't know what kind of hodgepodge we're going to make. Whatever it is, it's your movie, I don't really, I'll just do what you tell me to do. So I went ahead and we started to make this picture. But just before I was very unhappy with the script, the way it was. And I'd written it and I wasn't too happy with it. So I said, let me get some collaborators of this. So I got Girish Karnar to sit on the script. And he turned out a draft, which I found interesting up to a point. Then I said, well, Girish understands a lot of this, but I do want a kind of ethos of Maharashtra, Marathi ethos. And then I got Vijay Tendulkar, who was extremely eminent playwright. And he went over the script. He did something with it. And then I got my dialogue writer, who's also an eminent figure of the theatre, Satyadev Dubey, and he worked on it. So all of us worked on the script. And eventually, after I got that script, I went ahead and started to shoot it the way I wanted to shoot it, which was not to tell a story in a linear sort of way, but keep going backwards and forwards, at different stages. And of course, Girish warned me. He said, you're going to confuse the audience if you're going to shoot this film like this. Nobody will understand what you're trying to do. So I wasn't sure whether that was the best method, but I followed it anyway. And I was pinning my hopes really on the central performance of Smita Patil, who at that time, this was her third film. She had appeared in a film before this, which was Nishant, which I had made. This was her fourth film. She'd appeared in Manthan and she'd appeared in Nishant. But she was not convinced that she wanted to be an actress. And I kept telling her, you have to be, you are an actress. You cannot say you're not. She said, no, I don't think this is a career for me, and so on. And it went on like that. And this went on like this while I was shooting the film. So until we finished shooting the film, and when the film was actually ready and it was released, and she went and won the national award, it's only then was she even convinced that she wanted to remain a film actress. Now, I was very fascinated by this kind of thing, because this is about an owl call and that somebody is going to die. And this is a kind of village belief. And I said I should put that into this film because it was very interesting. The location where we were shooting, which was in Goa, in the Hindu part of Goa, this taluka, that is a sub-district called Fonda. And it's a beautiful old house and everything. And so I was shooting it there, and suddenly it struck me that this might be a good scene to put into the film. It wasn't part of the script. So I just put that in. And then, of course, unconsciously, I had done something else. I had done this kind of thing before with my own film, Ankur, in which there is this woodpecker, the call of a woodpecker, which when the protagonist of the film, the boy, with Shabana, after they make love, and he hears the sound for the first time in the village, and he asks her what that is. So she says, that's a woodpecker. And the same thing gets repeated later when his own wife is there. She asks that, and suddenly everything comes back to him. But the origin of that was actually from a Satyajit Ray film called Pratidbandhi, in which you had the young man, you know, it's a sad story really, and he gets no job and finally finds a job at the end, towards the end of the story, where he goes to the districts and he gets a little job as a salesman in the districts, and he goes there. He's now, of course, his family is all split and his sister's gone and so on. And then he's there and he just thinks, you know, he just sits there and he hears the bird. And he recollects the childhood with this girl when he'd asked her what bird that was. And he'd used it first. And then, of course, that the sequence ends where you have this, you know, funeral procession. You don't see the funeral procession, but you hear the call, you know, what they say during the funeral procession. You know, Ram Ram Satya, you know.
Yeah.
So that thing he had used, and I didn't realize that it had influenced me a great deal.
Right, right.
And when I did this, you know.